Guys, it's me, Shaw360, and this is going to be, hopefully, a really quick chat video. This is a chat video I'm literally doing by request, because I did not intend to do this at all. But I'm doing this video because it was requested, and then I had another friend that asked me if I was going to do it, so I'm going to talk about the whole Got7 thing. But I don't want to talk about it very long, because number one, Got7 is not a group I follow that way. Number two, I actually had to look up the situation in order to have an opinion about it. And number three, there's already been so much commentary about the whole situation that I just don't feel like I have anything productive to add to it other than maybe a little bit of context. So, apparently the situation was that Yugim and Bam Bam were caught on Snapchat doing things that are unbecoming of an idol. Yugim apparently was seen being drunk on Snapchat, and he is under the American legal age to drink. And with Bam Bam, he was caught on a Snapchat using the word nigga, N-I-G-G-A. Well, my first thought with Yugim was, I'm not really mad at the fact that this young guy is drinking. More that I am upset that he is not using more caution in terms of law breaking in a foreign country. And hear me out on this. I don't personally have any problem with underage drinking, but I feel like anybody who travels for a living, especially as part of their career as an entertainer, when you're going to a new country, you should be made aware of the laws that are going to affect you in your time in that country. You know, and as a woman especially, it's even more so for us, because in a lot of countries, a lot of women aren't allowed to travel alone. They aren't allowed to be dressed certain ways when they are traveling. And as a considerate and smart traveler, you really should examine the places that you're going to before you go there. And instead of acting the way you would in your own home, you act the way you're supposed to act when you're in somebody else's home. Because that's what traveling is. It's an invitation to someone else's home. So if I was to go to my friend Margaret's house and she tells me we don't wear shoes in my house, take them off at the door, as a respectful guest of hers, I'm going to take off my shoes. Yugim, as a guest of the United States, if our laws say that anyone under the age of 21 cannot drink, as a guest in our house, I expect you not to drink. And again, like I said, I don't really have a problem with the idea of underage drinking as like a social thing. What I have a problem with is not paying close attention to law, only because there are other countries that they don't play with their laws. In the United States, we kind of give people a second chance on a lot of different things. But in some countries, you break their law, and it's big consequences for you. And it not only impacts you, but it could impact your group. It could impact your ability to earn money in that country in the future. It could impact your reputation, even though it may be something that you're used to doing at home all the time. So I really would hope that in the future, Yugim would pay more attention to the laws and the places he's at and act accordingly before he does something that could get him in big trouble somewhere. Now for Bam Bam. For Bam Bam, that's a little bit trickier, because it's the use of this word that for a lot of people has a lot of loaded connotation. And there's been so many debates between fans about if you should be mad at it, if you shouldn't be mad, you know, is it such a big deal, yada, yada, yada. But what no one seems to be talking about is kind of the context of where America is right now and why this would even be as big a deal as it is. Because there's been, you know, controversies with idols saying the N-word before, you know, saying it when they were singing a song that had the word in it, or even being accused of adding the word in where it wasn't there before, you know, using it when they're freestyling, stuff like that. But right now, in America, race is on the tip of everybody's tongue. Like the shooting death of Alton Sterling and Philando Castile and the 5 officers in Dallas. This is stuff that is in the news as we speak. They just buried Alton Sterling, I think, a couple of days ago. So, I mean, there are a lot of feelings all over the place about race. And so for someone who is an outsider to use a word that has such a loaded connotation and use it during a time when so many people are sensitive to race issues, it became a bigger deal than maybe it would have been at any other time. But the part that I maybe put as laying blame for Bam Bam or whatever is the fact that this is something that I have mentioned on my own channel before with people when it comes to Korean culture. I don't think it's cool to use words from a culture that's not yours if you don't have an understanding of those words. Now, I did a video on my channel called My Silly Hair Story, where I went into a beauty shop that was owned by a Korean owner, and I used the word 감사합니다, which means thank you. And from what I have learned from researching it and everything else, that was probably the more formal way to use the word thank you. And I used that word on purpose because that was a word I felt comfortable using. It was a word that I saw as a respectful tone to use that word. It wouldn't bring offense to him, but it would acknowledge respect for this gentleman. But I would not call this older gentleman ajushi or call him oppa or anything like that, because those terms are terms that I'm not as comfortable using, that I don't have as much social context using, and that I could run the risk of offending this man if he doesn't feel I'm close enough to use these words, or if he feels like I'm talking to him too informally. And I feel like the same thing goes for someone who's using English slang. And I know in K-pop, English slang is a part of the way they draft their songs. They get these songs that they buy from these European composers, and they throw in Lego or swag or YOLO or whatever other word there is that's cool at the time. And this might be one of those words that when listening to hip-hop music, he's like, yeah, that's that cool word. But using it, not in a performance, not in a song, using it, if you really don't understand that word, it's just inadvisable to use it. And that's just across the board, you know. Every language has its own rules and etiquette for how language is used. You know, in America, there's not a lot of words that are considered informal words. Like we're not that kind of society. Like we have Mr. and Mrs. and ma'am and sir, but even those, we've kind of laxed the rules on how we use that. But in a lot of other countries, there are formal rules for address. There are words you can use with friends, words you can't use with friends, words that people use with each other that nobody else can use. Even in America, even though we don't have a lot of formal and informal words, when I was in high school and I lived in El Paso, the phrase wetback was a phrase I heard a lot in high school. And I went to a high school that was probably 90% Hispanic. And I heard Hispanic people using it between themselves. But at no time while I was going to school with these people, while I was growing up around these people, because I was in El Paso for 10 years, I never thought that I was entitled to use that word, because I understood that that word was a part of their culture, and it was a way that they took a word that was derogative and was a racial slur against them, and they used it amongst themselves in a move of empowerment. So yeah, I understood what that word meant. I understood the history of that word, because I definitely had a lot more context from my understanding than Bam Bam would have of this particular word. But I still didn't feel entitled to use it, even though I had mostly Hispanic friends, because that's mostly who was in my school, and I could understand snippets, bits and pieces of Spanish, but I never felt comfortable using that word, and I never would, and I really didn't have a reason for using it. But I feel like when you visit people's cultures or people's countries, you know, stay in your lane. I think it's as simple as that. Stay in your lane. You know, stick to what you really know. You know, and that's one thing, like teaching English or teaching foreign languages to people, I never think it's a good idea to try to teach somebody slang first. Teach them true and proper vocabulary first, and then they can get kind of an understanding for slang, because there's always a chance to use slang wrong. But yeah, I just feel like, you know, that is a word that he didn't have to use. And I think he wouldn't have gotten any of this trouble if he wasn't trying so hard to use the cool English word. That being said, he has issued an apology. I'm willing to accept his apology. I don't take it as being a career-defining moment for him, or that he shouldn't be allowed to pursue his future because of him using that word. I think that Mark deserves some blame, because if it's his friends that encourage Bam Bam to do it, and Mark understands the kind of person that Bam Bam is, that he's going to take this and go running with it, then he should have stepped in and been like, hey dude, my friends are fucking with you. Don't listen to them. They don't know what they're talking about. They're just, you know, they're pulling your chain. if you don't do that, then you're irresponsible, you know, because you introduced this person to a group of people that they don't know, that they're trusting based on your recommendation. It's your job to come forward and say, hey, they're fucking with you, don't use this word. But yeah, I mean, that's how I feel about the Bam Bam situation. I feel like, you know, you should be respectful of language and how it's used in other cultures, and if you don't understand how it's used in the culture, don't use it. Don't use it. And then lastly, JYP. I hate to have to talk to you like this, but we're going to have this chat. You've already seen what social media can do to your groups, because you saw what happened with 2PM and J Park and the whole MySpace controversy. Why don't you have a class for your idols to show them how to protect their image in public settings in the age of social media? I think that not only you, but I think every single K-pop company out there should have this lesson. I feel like this is a lesson that should be taught in schools for everybody. How important social media is, how permanent the impermanence of social media is, how important it is to protect your privacy at all costs. Because a lot of us put stuff out there in social media that we think, oh, it's just a one-off, people are going to forget it, it's never going to come up again. Wrong. Stuff comes up all the time. I'm going to tell you a story about me when it comes to social media. When I first started my Shell 360 channel, I did 2 videos that aren't on there anymore. The first video was my very first K-pop haul, where I hauled 2PM album and I hauled EXO's Overdose. And then my second video on the channel was a video of me talking about writing fan fiction. Neither one of those videos are on my channel anymore. Do you know that I have a friend who to this day remembers my first 2 videos even though they're not on there anymore? It's never really over. It's never really over. And then I have videos on my channel that I posted, and then I think a week or 2 later, I was told that somebody else had started reposting my videos on their own channel for monetization. I have a whole series about that on my channel too. But people copy videos, people remember videos, people save videos to clouds, people will tell you that it's a Snapchat, but then somebody saves the snap. Everything you put out there for the internet, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, pick any media source you want to, YouTube, it's there forever. If it's not there forever in maybe the context that you meant for it to be, it's going to be there forever in some other context, either as a memory or saved to somebody else's hard drive or saved to somebody else's cloud. And everyone should definitely be more aware of how they use social media. You know, it's not something that I feel good about. You know, honestly, as a person who's middle-aged, I feel bad for you guys that you have to have so few instances to let yourselves go, that you don't have freedom because there's always somebody waiting with a camera phone to film you and catch you being silly or stupid or immature. And years later, when you're trying to build yourself up, somebody can bring back that clip of you being immature and it's right there. Like, honestly, I don't know how we're going to have presidents in 30 years, because all the people who are young people now who did stupid stuff on the internet or did stupid stuff and somebody videotaped it and saved it somewhere, when somebody who could be eligible to be president comes up on the scene, somebody's about to pull out that tape from, you know, summer 2016 where you got drunk and vomited all over yourself, and then you're going to have to be a grown person explaining that, well, you know, it was Cabo, spring break, I wanted to party, blah, 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 blah. Because that's the kind of world we live in now. No one's allowed to make mistakes anymore. Everyone is held up to this impossible standard if they're in the public eye. So, you know, I really do feel bad for you guys. I really do, because you didn't have a childhood like I had. Like, I remember it was a big deal if you knew somebody with a video camera, because a lot of people didn't have them. So you always knew when you were on film for the most part, because video cameras were not cheap and not everybody had them. You know, there were a lot of stupid things I did that no one witnessed but maybe me and my friends, and no one will ever know about it. And they could talk about it perhaps, but, you know, if there's no images, then it didn't exist. But I'm just saying, like, this is something that JYP should know. He's been in the game far too long not to know better. So, JYP, you've got to do better, and Bam Bam, I hope you'll do better. I hope when you give your official apology in Korea that you acknowledge maybe what it was about the situation that was a problem, because on his apology on Instagram, he really didn't explain what he was apologizing for. He just says, I'm apologizing for everything. Yugyeom, I hope that you become a better traveler, because this is your career, something you plan to do for a long, long time. Protect yourself when you're overseas. And for the rest of you, this is my chat about it. If you have anything negative or ugly to say in the comment section, go on ahead and say it. But don't be mad if I address you with a response. Alright then, guys. That's everything. I will see you guys on the K-Drama Club review, because that's next. Bye.